Technical Community College, STCC.
This is great. I am a proud member of the Hispanic Association of Higher Education at STCC. Just a little bit about myself. I'm, in addition to being a professor in the business department within the School of Liberal and Professional Studies at STCC, I'm also an STCC alum, class of 1992. My relationship with the college goes back to when I first became a student there. I think it was 1989 or 90. I love STCC, and I love being able to teach at my alma mater. And financial planning, I primarily teach accounting and finance courses, but financial planning is something that's really near and dear to me. On the outside world, I have small practice where I do accounting and financial planning work with clients. And the whole goal is to help people to navigate through any times, but especially now during this COVID environment that we're all faced with. It's been especially rough. And what I would like to do is I have a brief presentation that Marco is going to kind of assist me with as I go through some slides, and perhaps talk a little bit about what it's like, what financial planning is, first of all, and maybe give you some helpful tips as to how to navigate yourself to being a better advocate for yourself during these times. Because again, we've seen a lot of bad things happen in addition to the health-related side of it. People are also suffering financially, and that's so unfortunate. And it's something that really I want to do whatever I can to kind of help with that. So let's get started. Marco, if you'd like to go into my first slide.
All right, certainly. And please, if you have any questions, write them in the chat and I'll mention them to Anthony.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit, folks, about what it means to be financially literate in today's COVID-19 society. Financial literacy is really something that is for everyone. It's, even though you may think of finance in and of itself as an area, well, I'm not a financial person, or I don't do that, someone does it for me. We all have a responsibility to ourselves to be financially literate, to understand the basics of good financial management. And as part of that, I'd like to kind of acclimate us to what some of those basic underlying themes are. So Marco, if you'd like to go to the next slide. So a definition of what financial literacy really is. Financial literacy, by definition, is the confluence of financial, credit, and debt management, and the knowledge that is necessary to make financially responsible decisions. Those decisions of which are integral to our everyday lives. It's something that even if you don't have a background in, you can get that background. You can understand what it takes to navigate yourself, how to respond to varying situations. I do teach a course at Springfield Technical Community College called Personal Financial Planning, and I'm proud to say that the course has been really great. And I've had so many students come out of the course feeling better about their basic understanding of financial planning than they did before. So, and I will be teaching that again in the fall. So this is a course, this is an area where I really can resonate with students, and we can talk about things that are on their minds. So I hope to be able to do that throughout today's presentation. So, Marco? Let's go through a couple of interesting facts. 40% of all US households carry some level of credit card debt, the average American of which holds a current balance on their credit card of $5,700. For only indebted households, excluding people who pay their balances in full of every month, the average debt is closer to $10,000. Take a moment and just reflect on that. What that's saying is that if you had 100 people, okay, 40 of those people would have some credit card debt. And a large portion of those people would have credit card debt that exceeds $9,000 in total. That's a lot of money to owe on a credit card. But again, I don't want to imply that I'm pointing the finger at anybody if they have that kind of debt on a credit card. It's hard to exist in today's society without having some debt. The problem becomes when that debt gets unmanageable, when it gets out of hand, and you don't know what to do about it. It can be a very scary feeling. I've dealt with many students, clients, people that have had that happen to them, where they didn't know where to turn. They didn't know how to manage themselves in the appropriate direction so that they could get past that. They could become what's called solvent again, financially solvent, able to pay those debts. Back in 2018, the average federal student loan debt per borrower was upwards of $33,000. 77% owed $40,000 or less, but more than 2.7 million owed $100,000 or more. I'm the biggest advocate of education that you'll probably ever find. I can't describe what my education has done for me, especially my education at STCC. But education is expensive. It's almost a necessary evil in the sense that we need that education to better ourselves and to better the lives of ourselves and our families. But it doesn't come cheap. Overall, between bank accounts and retirement savings, the median American household currently holds about $11,700 in debt. Almost 30% of the households have less than $1,000 saved. And when we say saved, we're talking about perhaps a savings account or a checking account or some combination of savings, checking, retirement. Okay, sometimes, especially in a world that we're in right now, in this type of world, retirement can seem like something that's virtually untouchable. And I want to express that it is something that you can reach. It is something that, despite the circumstances we're in, we can all look towards. Hopefully, we will get to that age where we can retire comfortably and have some savings. But the times that we're in simply make it more challenging, but not impossible. How do you protect? Let's talk a little bit about your credit. And I'm going to have you think about this just for a moment. First of all, how many of you own a credit card? Okay. Some people may have a credit card, some people may not. As I often tell my students in my personal finance class, and usually when I survey, if I have a class of 32 students and I survey them, I usually have about a third who do have a credit card. And maybe the other third are in the process of applying for a credit card, or perhaps they may have been denied. The other third hasn't begun to think about having a credit card because they've had some, they've been told, oh, credit cards are bad. Well, I'm here to say that I think a credit card when you're a student is necessary in the sense that one of the things you have to do from the onset to set yourself up properly, financially speaking, for the future is to establish a solid, dependable line of credit, okay? A credit history, if you will. And how do you do that? You do that by applying for a credit card, making small purchases on that credit card, and paying at least the minimum balance due, preferably the entire balance do? What that does is it sets a pattern in motion, and that pattern is a pattern that allows you to be trusted. If you make your minimum payment, or perhaps the entire balance payment, on time for a consecutive number of periods, you're building a solid credit history. You're considered a good credit risk. And risk is the basic premise that all of finance is based on. If a company extends credit to you and you're missing payments, or you're haphazard in making your payments off of cycle, that establishes a bad credit history. And your credit history is determined by something called your credit score, which we can talk a little bit about later. But just keep in mind that credit cards, if managed properly, are not all bad. They can be good, especially when you're trying to set a pattern, establish a credit history when you're young. So I'll just talk a little bit about this for a moment. So how do we protect and build our credit in 2020? I don't think there's any doubt that this has been the most challenging year for many of us that we can remember, okay? And I think when it goes down in history, this will be a year that people say, wow, I'm glad I made it through that. Some haven't. That's so unfortunate, but you can, okay? That coronavirus pandemic that we're in right now, it's led billions around the world to focus on protecting, first, their health and their physical well-being. That has to come first. But it's also led to people understanding how financially vulnerable they can be. It's threatened the livelihood and well-being of hundreds of millions of people globally. Let's just talk about Massachusetts for a moment. Massachusetts had the highest unemployment rate this week of 17.4%. That's actually up from June. It was 16.6% in June. Right now, we're higher than the national average, which is hovering a little over 11%. People are losing their jobs. Why is that? It's because companies are not earning revenue. They're not making money, profits are down. And why is that? It's because of decreased spending, inhibited credit, etc. So it's very much a cyclical process when we talk about how it is for you to build your credit and how it relates to our economy, to employment, etc. That loss of income due to the closure of borders and businesses means a noticeably large percentage of consumers have less income to pay those bills, and the bills just keep coming. Coupled with the fact that approximately 80% of American households are living paycheck to paycheck going into this pandemic, and the fact that we're in this recessionary period. Many consumers have begun missing payments on their credit cards, their car loans, their homes. That's a tough situation to be in when you have to make the choice of, do I buy food for my family or myself? Do I pay for healthcare, or do I pay my credit card balance or my auto loan, my mortgage? That's a tough choice to make, but many of us are in the position of having to make choices like that. And it's not easy. Marco? So let's go back just for a moment. Are you financially literate? What does that mean? Do you understand what it actually means to be financially literate? If not, are you willing to learn a little bit more about financial literacy? Let me say one thing. The willingness that you have to learn about financial literacy really starts at the point of honesty, being honest with yourself. To take a look at yourself and say, where am I at financially right now? What is my current financial position? What do I own? Do I own a home? Do I own a car? Do I own some other types of items? furniture, equipment of any type, and then look at what you owe. What are my debts? Do I have a mortgage? Do I have a car payment? Do I have credit cards that I have to pay? So initially, the first step to becoming financially literate in a COVID-19 environment is to be truthful with yourself. Look at what you own compared to what you owe. Okay? You can put that on paper, and it may make even more sense to you. What's my personal net worth? The difference between what you own or your personal assets and what you owe or your personal liabilities, that difference is called your personal net worth. If that number is a positive number, you're doing okay, relatively speaking. If that number is a negative number, you've got some things that you have to work on. How much money are you saving regularly? Are you able to save money? I know that's easier said than done, saving money. It's so easy to say that, but so very hard to do that. Are you in debt? Very hard to save money when you're in debt. It's hard to save money when you're not in debt. It's twice as hard, 3 times as hard when you're in debt. Do I have a financial plan to ensure that I have enough money to live on, to exist on right now? Or am I living beyond my means? Living beyond your means can be fun now, but it can have severe consequences in the future. What does living beyond your means mean? It means that you're purchasing things and doing things right now that justifiably you can't afford. There's not enough money on hand to support that type of lifestyle. So as you look at this and as we talk, think about, I'd like you to really consider what steps can you take now to control your own financial destiny. The very first step is being honest with yourself, assessing where you're at, because where you're at right now is going to determine where you go in the future. Marco? I'm going to give you some thoughts that I have on how you can manage yourself towards a positive net worth, towards a positive cash flow each month. So I have here some general tips. First tip, okay? At least try to spend less than you actually earn. I know that sounds ridiculous in the sense of, well, how could I spend more than I earn? Truth be told, many people spend more than they actually make. And when it comes time to eventually pay for those things within their lifestyle, they come up short. As a rule of thumb, it doesn't matter how much you're earning, okay? Everybody has different jobs, different levels of education. They work in different industries. Some people work in retail. Some people work in manufacturing. Some people work in education. What you do for a living is much less important than how you manage your net pay from what you do. So it doesn't matter how much or how little you're paid. You'll never get ahead if you spend more than you're actually making. It's easier to spend less than it is to earn more. In other words, if I say, well, I want all these things, I'm going to get 2 more jobs to help pay for all those things. Okay, that's certainly something you can think about doing, but think about the time, the effort, and what you're doing to yourself and your health if you take on 2 more jobs. You may be earning enough money to supplement your lifestyle, but that's a lot of effort, time, and work. So if you look at yourself and say, this is what I make, I would like to spend less than what I'm actually making. You're always going to have that financial buffer, as I call it. You won't get yourself into a position where you compromise your credit. which is going to make it very difficult in the future for you to obtain a car loan, a mortgage, an educational loan. So live within your means. A few cost-cutting efforts in a few different areas can result in big savings. Let's talk about one. You work part-time and you earn $100 a week. That's after taxes. Okay, so that would be your net pay. However, you routinely spend more than that amount each week on eating out, recreational activities, charging any excess to your credit card, and paying it off just a little bit at a time. You're spending more than you're earning. And by using your credit card and carrying a balance, you're actually spending more than you're aware of because of that all-important factor that we sometimes want to forget, interest. Interest on a credit card is the money that you're paying for the use of money. Interest in and of itself is money paid for the use of money. And when you charge something and pay for it incrementally, with the interest that's added to your balance, you're actually paying much more for that item than you would have if you bought it outright. It's compounding interest that gets us. Now, compounding interest can be a good thing if we're investing, but it's a bad thing if we're financing or paying off a debt. Tip number 2, stick to a budget. Creating a budget is not an easy thing to do, but it's not as complicated as it sounds. What's a budget? A budget is a look at historical data, what's happened in the past, as an indicator of what to do in the future. When people budget, corporations budget, they're looking at past activity and they're trying to successfully plan for the future so that they will always have enough money on hand to meet their objectives. Personally speaking, a budget usually consists of things like your income, any other income from investments or other sources, weighed against your expenses, typical household expenses, rent, car payment, cell phone, internet, food, entertainment. All those things are typical living expenses. And if you actually put everything out on paper, it makes it much easier for you to derive what you're spending your money on. It's an objective look at what you're spending your money on and how that all works together. Are you bringing in enough to cover those expenses? Are you having to rely on your credit cards a lot more frequently to bridge the gap? So setting up a budget is really, really important. And it does not matter how much money you make, whether you're making $5,000 a year, $50,000 a year, $500,000. Everyone can benefit from being on a budget. Give you an example. You have monthly cash inflows. That's money coming in. $2,000 a month, which would translate to $24,000 a year. Your average monthly expenses, what we would call cash outflows, include $800 in rent, $400 in food, gas and insurance on your car, $250, cell phone, internet fees, $150, and some other miscellaneous items, $50. I'm sure those are expenses that we can all resonate with. Your net cash flow per month, the difference between your inflows and your outflows is a positive $350. Right there, you know that you're spending less than you're bringing in. That's your starting point. What you do with the $350 is completely up to you. It's a cushion. You know that your net cash flow, okay? Now that you know what your net cash flow is, it's easier for you to budget accordingly for other things that can come up, like an unexpected medical bill or a car expense. Life brings surprises all the time. And some of those surprises may jump at you very quickly. Do you have the money to pay for them if they were to occur? If you were driving down the street and you hit a pothole and caused some major damage to your car, maybe the car wasn't drivable. You need your car. It gets you to work. It gets you to school. It gets you to see your friends, etc. Whatever you happen to be doing. I know we're doing less of all that traveling right now, but in a normal environment, you'd be traveling relatively frequently. No wheels on a car, no driving. Got to fix it quickly. Do you have the money in the budget to do that? Completely unexpected occurrence. What else can you do with the excess money? Well, in addition to establishing a rainy day fund, a little bit of money put away to cover those unexpected occurrences. How about saving up and maybe treating yourself to a nice vacation or a night out or a weekend somewhere, whatever you desire. People think that when you're doing financial planning, it's all fire and brimstone. Oh, I have to save this much money and I can't waste it and I can't. That's absolutely false. I'm a big proponent, a huge proponent of budgeting yourself successfully, but also of using some of that excess money to enjoy your life, to plan for things that make you happy, not just your day-to-day expenses, but those things that really make you happy. Vacations, short trips, entertainment, concerts, all those things. And what most of my students, frankly, have realized throughout the course that they've taken with me is that when we put together, by the end of the semester, their own financial budget, they have the ability to save money and do those things. Something that they didn't realize before because they had never objectively thought about a budget. They had never thought about putting it on paper and determining what money was coming in versus what money was going out. So it's something that's very plausible, very possible. And it's meant to make you more comfortable with the whole process. And it's meant to make you happier from the perspective that you know where you're going. Number 3, pay off your credit card debt. If you have credit cards, which tend to be the number one obstacle for most Americans to getting ahead financially, pay those off as quickly as you can. If it's a choice between, do I pay off my credit cards or do I take some of that excess money that I've successfully budgeted myself for and do I invest it? That's often a question I get. What should I do? Should I pay off debt or should I take any excess money and invest it? Pay the debt off first. As you get yourself properly managed financially, you're going to see that accumulating debt will accumulate and rise faster than a potential investment would. In other words, the debt is going to grow faster than your actual investment in a stock or a bond or a mutual fund would. So this is never going to catch up with this. If you have extra funds and you pay the debt off first and reduce it, you've always got the option of investing later. So given the two choices, always try to settle your debt, especially credit card debt, because the rates on a credit card, even for students who do tend to get favorable rates, I don't know if you're aware, but you can apply for a student credit card and get a very favorable rate if you do qualify. But even student credit card rates can be 10, 12%. And that can get out of hand very quickly. Give you an example. Use your credit card to purchase a new stereo system. That new stereo system costs $360. You have an 18% interest rate on that credit card. That may seem like a lot, but it's an average rate for most most people. Instead of paying off the entire balance, you decide to pay the minimum monthly amount of $25 a month, expecting that you'll have the entire balance paid off by the 15th month. Not true. Because you're paying just the minimum balance each month, due to the compounding factor of the 18% interest rate, you're actually going to be required to make another 17 additional payments to pay off that entire amount. So you're going to end up paying $49 just in interest. The $360 stereo really cost you $409. Yes, you get the benefit of time. However, you end up paying, in this case, a huge chunk more than you expected to. It's always better to pay off your debts sooner rather than later, as quickly as you possibly can, to save that extra cash. Marco? Tip number 4, set up a short-term savings plan. What's the difference between short and long-term? Well, generally speaking, short-term, you're looking at the next 12 months. Long-term is a longer horizon, 12 months to anywhere up to 5 years or 10 years. Generally, we try to keep it to a 5-year horizon. But set yourself up a short-term, 1-year savings plan. What do you plan to do within the next 12 months? You've heard it before, pay yourself first. If you wait until you've met all of your other financial obligations before you see what's left over for savings, chances are you'll never have a healthy savings account or healthy investments. Resolve to set aside 5 to 10% of your salary before you start to pay those bills. Again, paying the bills is important, but you don't want to completely neglect a short-term savings plan. 5 to 10%. Let's think about that. What does that really mean? Let's say after working for an entire month, you have a net cash flow, the difference between your cash coming in and your expenses, of $200. Okay, your net cash flow is $200. If you saved 10% of that $200, how much are you putting in the bank in savings? $20. 5%, okay, $10. A nominal amount of money based on your net. 5 to 10% is possible without disrupting other things. And generally speaking, if you saved 5 to 10% of all your net cash flow, your net income, throughout your lifetime, you'd have plenty of money to retire. But it's something a lot of people don't consider. They don't take that $20 and put it away. Okay? Set themselves up. It's very, very important to do that. Example, you make $24,000 a year and your net cash flow each month is $200. After some time, you've put aside $500 over time that you want to invest for your future. Now you're sitting on $500. Let's say it's sitting in your savings account, getting 0.8% interest. Savings accounts are notorious for very low interest rates. You can do better than that. Let's say you want to put that $500 into a certificate of deposit at 3%, and it's guaranteed. It won't go below 3%. Because of the fact that you're now reaping the benefits of compound interest, your initial $500 investment is going to be worth $712.90 at the end of the 12-month period. And you will have made $212, almost $213 in interest just by locking it up into a 12-month certificate of deposit. I should explain what a certificate of deposit is. They are short-term investments, usually can be set up right at your bank or financial institution, in which case the interest rate is guaranteed. It's not variable. It's a fixed interest rate that's guaranteed for a certain period of time. And you agree to put the money on deposit with the bank and not touch it for a certain period of time. Those periods of time can range between 3 months, 3 years, 5 years in some cases. A typical one is a year, okay? And the longer you lock the money up with the bank, the better your interest rate. So something to consider, very low risk type of investment that appeals to many people. My top tip, okay? These are the 5 best tips that I can think of to get yourself toward financial success and literacy. Contributing to a long-term retirement plan. If you'll notice, tip number 4 was a short-term retirement plan to set yourself up for the short term, to give you some excess funds that you can dip into if needed. That's your rainy day fund, or invest for a period, okay? Retirement comes faster than you would think. Many of you watching this video are probably in your 20s or 30s, and you say, I'm not retiring. Don't people retire in their 60s, 70s? Well, guess what? It comes up faster than you would think. And if you don't start now, it makes it much harder to start a retirement plan and save enough money in the future. You're not going to want to work your entire life, okay? Nor should you have to. There's nothing wrong with always being engaged, but do you really want to be working when you're 70 or 80 years old? Full time? That's tough. And many of us would like to be in a financial position where perhaps we don't have to work full time, or perhaps not at all when we approach that age. People are living longer these days thanks to the miracles of modern medicine, and despite all the negativity that's in the papers right now, people on average are still living much longer than they lived years ago, which means the retirement age is being pushed out significantly, which means you're going to have to have enough money to live on for a longer period of time. The key is to start now. Don't think about how old you are. Think about starting now. If your employer has a 401k plan and you don't contribute to that, you're walking away from one of the best deals out there. A 401k plan is an employer-sponsored retirement plan. Often, the employer will contribute money into that plan as you contribute money into the plan as well. If you're already contributing, if you are lucky enough to be working, or perhaps after you graduate, you get your first job, you have a 401k plan that your employer is sponsoring, and you're contributing to it, over time, try to increase your contributions up to the maximum, okay? If your employer does not offer a retirement plan, there are individual retirement accounts that you can consider, which are similar in nature but are not done directly through an employer. You're 20 years old. You've just graduated from STCC's business program. You got your first job. Your new job is going to pay you $30,000 a year. And after 6 months, you're going to be eligible to start contributing to the company's 401k plan. Your employer is going to match your contributions up to a maximum. Okay, so there's usually a period of deferment when you're employed with a company that they will allow you to, they will require you to meet. Usually it's 6 months because the employer wants to know that you're going to stay with them. And once you do, they'll start contributing along with your contributions to a retirement plan. Let's say that money, which can be done in automatic payroll deductions, comes out each pay period about $125 a month. And your employer matches your contributions. Think about this. You're saving $3,000 a year which really equates to 10% of your annual income. By the time you're 60 years old, 40 years down the road, notwithstanding any applicable interest, you will have saved yourself over $100,000, probably not even missing the fact that the money is coming out of your paycheck regularly. Think about that, $100,000 in 40 years. That's a lot of money by any standards. And it's very possible. All you have to do is set yourself up for that. Consider, I'm not too young to start. You're never too young to start investing. So I'm going to take a step back here. I know I've been talking a lot. To become financially literate, I have to understand and then implement basic skills that are going to set me on a path to securing my own financial future. I have to be honest with myself. What's my current position? How can I better myself as time progresses, no matter what obstacles I'm faced with? I don't mean this to sound corny, but this was actually an acronym given to me by someone that I have a lot of respect for. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. What does that mean? The 5 P's, proper preparation prevents poor performance. If you prepare properly right now, if you set yourself up for success in the future, you're going to have a good result. The odds of you having a poor result, if you work hard to set yourself up properly right now, are rather low. You're going to have some ups and downs. That's part of investing. That's part of the timeline. And many people have asked me, in today's environment, the stock market's going down or it's fluctuating, okay? Just yesterday, the Dow Jones Industrial dropped about 1%, somewhere around 225, 226 points. We're going to have more of that. We're in a strange predicament right now. Companies are laying people off. They're furloughing people because people have less disposable income to purchase products and services with. And what does that cause? It causes a ripple effect. The markets are fluctuating quite a bit. However, I always tell my clients, students, if you're invested, you have to be willing to ride that storm out, okay? Because things will get better in time. But preparing yourself now, while you're young, is going to help you become financially successful in the future, short-term or long-term. And it all starts with being financially literate right now, assessing where you're at, assessing what you need to do to get to a specific point, and then sticking with it and staying the course. Start planning now. It's never too late. Couple things I'd like you to be able to take away from this. Number 1, live within your means. Number 2, budget yourself. Be a little more conservative, meaning, okay, are there certain things that I want? Are there certain things that I absolutely need? There's a big difference between want and need. It's not to say that you always have to suppress what you want, but in this type of environment, be more concerned with what is needed than wanted. Okay, that's called conservatism, conservative investing. Pay off those credit cards if you have them. Try not to carry a balance if you can help it. If you don't have a credit card, apply for one so that you can start to establish a credit history. Make responsible purchases and payments regularly on that credit card. Establish a now savings plan, short term, and establish a later savings plan, a retirement plan for the long term. These are basics. They're going to help to set you on a path to greater financial freedom, less stress, more contentment, and you'll be able to realize your financial goals for the future. I'm happy to help with any of these things at any point. Just some thoughts that I had about how I can help to point people in the right direction. I'm open to any questions. I hope I didn't use up all my time, but I'd love to hear what your questions are.
That was great, Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you.
We had one question, which is, what is a good investment for a 19-year-old working part-time?
Depending on the amount of net cash flow that you have. Again, I'm going to go back to my basic premise of first, determine what your net cash flow is on a monthly basis. You're taking your cash inflows, measuring it against your cash outflows. If that number is positive, if you have a positive net cash flow, now you have options. Having a negative cash flow where your expenses exceed the amount of money that you're bringing in each month, your options are very limited. What do you have to do? Work towards paying off the debt, right? But if you have excess money coming in, more being brought in than you do being expended in terms of monthly expenses, you now have a positive situation, and that gives you options. One of those options could be investing. I would first find out, okay, so you had said that it was part-time employment. So chances are if it's part-time employment, you're not going to have a retirement plan through your employer. If you're 18 or older, and I think, Marka, you had said the person was 19, you can set up an individual retirement plan through a financial planner. You can also invest in a certificate of deposit through your local bank. Those would be two viable options. The amount of money that's usually required to set up an individual retirement account in most cases is very small, a couple of $100 maybe, and you can set one of those into motion where you're making regular contributions into the individual retirement account. I would stress that there are different types of individual retirement accounts. So please make sure that you speak with your financial planner or accountant or tax provider to determine which one would be the right one for you. But certificate of deposit and IRA are two plausible investments that come to mind for that individual, and both of which are relatively secure in nature, because when you're investing in a certificate of deposit, very little risk. The risk is all really with the bank, because the bank is using your funds to in turn loan out to other people and earn money on that, on your money. If it's a individual retirement account, that's usually going to be diversified into a portfolio of investments, which mitigates or lowers the overall risk. So don't think stocks is what I'm saying. Think safe investments, IRA or CD.
Great, thank you. We've got two more questions, which is great. One from Lori Milliken. It says, I have heard that paying a credit card off affects your credit score negatively. Is that true?
Not really, because your credit score, okay, and I didn't get a chance to really talk about credit score, so maybe I could take a moment and just talk about what a credit score is. A credit score is based on your payment history, ability to pay. A good credit score is upwards of 700, 800, okay? I believe they go to 850 and they start around 350, okay? So if you can picture a range of 350 to 850, 350 would be a low, compromised credit score. What's within that? Well, the chances of you obtaining a loan or getting a credit card with a low interest rate are probably not very possible when you're on the low end of a credit score. Somewhere in between, you would have decent credit, maybe 500 credit score. What would that mean? Your ability to obtain credit goes up, and your interest rate is probably going to be lower. At the opposite end, where you have really good credit, I would say somewhere above 700, okay? Your ability to obtain a loan is almost a given in that sense. And your interest rate, you can demand a very low interest rate because your credit score is so good. So within that spectrum, when you're paying off a credit card, and I believe you said in its entirety, what you're actually doing is establishing good credit. It doesn't have, it shouldn't have an adverse effect on your credit. What it should have is a flat or favorable effect on your credit as long as your payments haven't been late or less than the minimum amount. In other words, if you're paying at least the minimum amount required per month on your credit card, and you're doing that on or before the due date, whether you pay it off in your entirety or pay it a little bit at a time, your credit score should incrementally grow upwards, not downwards. So I would recommend making regular payments on the credit card, okay? Here's an important thing. If you're new and you've just gotten a credit card and you're still trying to build your credit, the best thing to do in that sense is to make minimum payments on the credit card. Okay, why is that? Because you want the benefit of time. You want to establish a history, a long history of making payments, minimum amount, on time. If you purchase something, if you're a new credit card holder, and you make a purchase and you immediately pay it off, that's not a bad thing, but you're not establishing a pattern. And credit scores are based on patterns. Banks, when they extend loans, they look for trends. They look for credit card patterns. And your credit score is indicative of a pattern of behavior, which means regularly making those payments over time. So that's a really important factor to consider when you're new to a credit card, when you've just gotten one. The most important thing you can do is build a positive pattern. And that's done by making at least the minimum payment on or before the due date.
Great, thank you. We had another question from Sarah. It says, you recommend paying off debt before investing. Do you recommend this even for debt with relatively low interest rates, say below 4 to 5%?
I think, generally speaking, that depends. Okay, and here's what it really depends on. If you have a credit card and your interest rate is 4 or 5%, but you have an investment that's going to yield you a guaranteed 8%. In that case, you want to go for the investment. So I'm going to just go back one step and kind of clarify what I meant by that. In most cases, 90% of the time, the interest rate on a credit card is going to be substantially higher than any interest rate that you can get on an investment. However, if the opposite is true, if the potential investment is going to yield you a better interest rate than your credit card is currently charging you, in that case, it really comes down to what would you prefer to do? Would you prefer to extinguish the debt, or would you prefer to invest the capital into the investment because of the difference in interest? In other words, if you have this relationship with the investment having a greater interest rate and your credit card yielding a very low interest rate or moderate interest rate, you can rethink that and make a different decision. I've always been conservative in the sense that I would always rather take care of my credit card rather than invest that money because it's the more conservative, the safer alternative. I will say, in today's market, because of the employment situation, because of all the things and changes in the market, this type of investment, especially if it's not a locked-in guaranteed rate, may fluctuate from day to day. pay the debt off first. Even if it's lower, I would recommend paying the debt off first. And that's because we're in such a tumultuous financial environment right now. But in a normal environment where you're given a choice and you've got very low rate of interest on your credit card or debt instrument, potentially a very high rate of interest on an investment, on a potential investment, you can be a little bit more liberal and you can consider the investment, over paying the debt off initially.
Great, thank you. And we have one more question from Eileen Cusick. She says, I hope this is not too far off topic. Students have shied away from traditional brick banks since they often do not offer anything free. Do you have any gotchas to share or watch out for about online banking, such as Venmo?
Yes, that's a great question. And I would be very wary of doing business with anything other than an established brick and mortar bank. I'm not a big fan of the enticements that the internet provides to students for investing their money. I think that a lot of that, frankly, I think that a lot of that could potentially be a scam. I would urge that if you're not certain about the reputation of an investment firm or a bank or a company or anything that promises you something that's too good to be true, there's an old adage, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. You're much better off doing business with a well-established local bank or credit union. What am I talking about? If your town happens to have a credit union, which are very good, they're very good at providing low interest rates, and favoring people that are either within a company or within a town. Credit unions are usually town-based, or they can operate within the confines of an actual corporation. You're much better off with something that's well-established, or your traditional big banks. What am I talking about? Bank of America, Toronto Dominion, TD Bank, any of your big banks. You're safe. Your money is safe by the FDIC. I didn't get into talking about the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, but investments are insured by the federal government up to certain amounts per bank. I would always err on a well-established, known financial entity, and I would stay away from these promises that some of these investment institutions on the internet come up with. I think a lot of times they're trying to induce students who don't have the financial literacy, the financial background, to make investments that are completely unprotected, unsecured.
Great. Thank you, Anthony. Does anybody else have any questions?
Are we all set?
Yeah. It's been a very informative hour. Thank you, Anthony.
This was awesome. Thank you so much, Anthony. It's great information. Thank you, everybody. We are so happy that you were able to join us.
If there's anybody who'd like to add anything, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to monopolize Brendan or anyone.
No, that was awesome. That was great. Thank you.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you very much.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And we will be, we'll probably try to share it so people also have access to the presentation. So they can also kind of refer back to it. And if you have any questions, just reach out to hahe at stcc.edu. But everybody just have a very nice weekend, and thank you so much. Thank you, Anthony. And thank you, Marco.
Welcome. Thank you.
Yes,
and I'm
of
always
course.
happy to help anyone with questions. Feel free to email.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.